Hello and welcome to all the participants who are listening to this webinar, How to Limit Your Exposure to Risk with Cyber Insurance. My name is Afi Merchant. I'm the SVP with ControlCase for Channel Partnership and Product Service Offerings. Today with me, I have Jeff Zaber from ConnectWise and Reed Wellock from Fifth Wall, who will be joining me for this particular webinar. To get started, I'll just talk a little bit about the agenda for this particular webinar. We will be discussing how ConnectWise brought the team together, from a partnership perspective. What were their thoughts in terms of addressing the problems which are facing MSP, the correlation between cyber maturity and cyber insurance, and how we can go ahead from here on to essentially see what cyber insurance and how you can mitigate your risk using cyber insurance. Let me hand over to Jeff, who can introduce himself and talk more about the partnership overview.
Thanks so much, Afi. Yes, my name is Jeff Zaba. I'm with ConnectWise, and I have been at ConnectWise for about 8 years. The role I'm in today, Director of Strategic Partnerships, is one that spans a lot of things that ConnectWise finds to be very important to our partners. And one of those things early on was that I was given was, hey, we've got to figure out what's going on with cyber insurance, compliance, and we've got to help our partners, right? So that was the remit that I was given in this role. And really, when it came down to trying to understand all things related to compliance and cyber insurance, it was clear that we had to break this into bite-sized chunks, right? So one of the things that we did is we said, okay, well, what's the impact to partners and their business? So if I'm an MSP, how is my business going to be affected? What does my team need to understand? And how do I talk to risk with my customers? And those are areas that, as you'll see later, have really become more and more important. I think that's no surprise. But what is also becoming more and more important is that you understand who owns which components of the risk. And without being able to divide those responsibilities up and share them, it becomes a very messy situation in the event that there's something bad happens in either your business or in your customer's business. So when we looked at partnerships, we had to find folks that had very similar philosophies, very similar values, and understood the uniqueness of the business for many TSPs. And so we came across Fifth Wall, we came across ControlCase, and we said, this partnership feels right. They certainly understand what MSPs are going through, TSPs are going through, and it became very clear the more that we worked together that there was sort of this inherent relationship between frameworks and compliance and cyber insurance. So it was a natural opportunity for us to come together to solve these problems and use the power of the ConnectWise ecosystem and the technology that ControlCase brings and the expertise that Fifth Wall brings to say, you know what, we really have something here if we can break it down and make it a real consumable problem that we can help MSPs and TSPs solve. So Reed, did you want to comment a little bit on how we got here?
Absolutely. Thank you, Jeff. My name is Reed Wellock. I'm the president of Fifth Wall Solutions. And as Jeff mentioned, we got involved at the time was collaborative, but for us, we've been working on this for about 6 years on our side at Fifth Wall. So just real quick, what Fifth Wall does is we're a wholesaler, which is kind of similar to what ConnectWise does on the MSP side as a distributor. So we're at the top working with the global marketplace and all the carriers to provide access to insurance products for Traditionally, it's been retail agents, but as we'll cover later on in the presentation, we have been talking more and more and more to the MSP community. So we started to see a lot of the complexity around these issues as our world started to evolve in the insurance side, and it started to pull in others into the equation. So when we were looking at not just working with agents, but also helping facilitate this process with MSPs, we started speaking with ControlCase, who had a very clear alignment with us on what we were trying to achieve with first getting good information out there, being able to educate folks, because a lot of what the issues we were seeing were around a clear void, a kind of black box of what is going on in the insurance world. So we want to break through that barrier and then really start working with MSPs specifically to understand some of those pain points and understand what is it we're trying to address. And I think that actually takes us further in the presentation, just if we want to start talking more about those problems that we started to recognize and start, when we started working with MSPs, specifically on our side, we started in just one by one approaching MSPs to talk about what is their experience with insurance, both for themselves, right? So for tech E&O specifically, and we'll cover what that is in a little bit, but then also for their end clients around their cyber. And we pulled out these 5 things. And what was really great was when we started working with ConnectWise, we started working with really close partners of theirs as well to validate these. So we got really clear feedback from folks that were living this day to day, just around what were the clearly identified pain points, but the problems. And as such, we then could start to bring solutions to the table by working with both ConnectWise and with ControlCase. So the first one, MSPs are being brought into their client's cyber insurance application process. And I think this is something that started a couple years ago, but it's really been ramping up, especially as the insurance marketplace has gotten more technical. We're going to cover later on why that started to happen, but really it was just an inevitable process that started to evolve, where the evaluation of risk started to really focus more on the risk controls, which were directly related to the MSPs. So those applications were more relevant to be filled out by MSPs. MSPs are then being asked to have a base level of understanding regarding the client's coverage and eligibility. So getting involved in this conversation with the end client just on the application in turn ended up being, okay, well, can you help me and understand what this is? Because there's been a pretty big void on the agent side in explaining to end clients, what is cyber insurance? Why is it needed? And when I fill out this application, what are the main things that are working for me and what's working against me? When we look at MSPs that don't understand the client's coverage and the carrier-specific IR process, that was a big thing that came up just in terms of MSPs wanting to know what that landscape looks like, because there's a lot of moving parts, but insurance is becoming that kind of barrier, so to speak, of do you move forward, do you not? Whose role is it at what point in time? So these are all things that we wanted to be able to demystify for MSPs to understand what is it insurance is looking for and what's their role in getting clarity. And I know that this was a large pain point that's probably been surfacing in the past year and a half, but MSPs are getting denied coverage themselves for their own tech E&O. And if not denied, their rates are going up considerably. And we'll cover what's happening in the marketplace later in the presentation, but that was a big one because that's firsthand pain. That's something that most MSPs were getting hit with on their renewing coverage. And the last element here with MSPs and clients risk control becoming part of their own MSP exposure, that ties to the first point. So whenever MSPs are getting more and more under the microscope, it's not just for their own security posture, but underwriters are now looking to see how they're managing their clients as well, to look at their level of risk. Jeff, anything you want to add here? You know, because we kind of were going through this with MSPs in real time at one point in time. Anything else on your end?
Yeah, and absolutely. So in practical terms, what we would hear at ConnectWise is our partners would come to us and say things like, my end customer said that they are going to get denied cyber insurance if they do not have certain things such as insert product or service here, and we'll get to those a little bit later. And it became a real fire drill for MSPs, and MSPs are fire drill experts, right? And so this is something that added another element of chaos, and ConnectWise and ControlCase and Fifth Wall are looking for ways to help make this process more manageable, both externally to their customers, internally for themselves, and then also making sure that there's a very clear understanding of what the MSP's capabilities are. And a lot of that goes into following certain frameworks and things like that. So yeah, that's pretty much it. And I think if we move ahead, there's some a little bit more detail on what cyber insurance is that would be useful to cover here for a minute or two, Reed.
Absolutely. I think just a quick definition of what we're talking about, because I certainly learned this working with end clients, but then when we work more and more with MSPs, the question mark of, okay, what is cyber insurance? Because, I've heard, well, cyber insurance, I heard that doesn't pay out, right? I heard it doesn't pay claims, or I've heard, it only includes certain things, but it has big goals or big gaps, I mean. So when we talk about cyber insurance, I use the word comprehensive. And what I mean by that is that there is coverage out there that stands on its own. And it has been offered in the traditional marketplace for the better part of a decade that really will make a business whole post-event. So everything you would want to see, from first party to third party to funds lost to business interruption, when we look at the claim, so if we look after the fact and we say, okay, how was a business impacted, right? Financially, on the reputation, these are all things that were looked at and said, okay, there needs to be coverage, right? There needs to be a safety net. So when we say comprehensive, it is meant to not only pay claims, but it's meant to catch all the parts and pieces. Now, what's given cyber insurance a bad rap in the past is there's still a lot of coverage out there that is being offered that is not comprehensive. And in fact, it's kind of the opposite. We see some that are just added on to other policies. So we've seen carriers just add on cyber via an endorsement. So if it's on like a general liability, some other line of insurance coverage. And the big problem there is that the consumer, the end client, hears this and they go, oh, okay, I have cyber, great. The word cyber's on it. I don't need to know much more than that. In reality, you take a close look at that. It's a really low limit and it doesn't include a lot of coverage. And when that client experiences an event and they go in to file a claim, they quickly realize, oh, wait, I do not have cyber coverage. And so a big piece of what was asked was, how do we figure this out? How do we find this out? And that was a role that I think all parties on this call were looking to solve, just in terms of having a streamlined process to get not just the evaluation, but benchmark. So don't want to bore everyone with the nuances of cyber insurance. It's not the most exciting topic, but I just want to establish that when we're talking about this, we do mean, a really high quality product that's really meant to pay a full claim.
Yeah, and so now we're going to touch a little bit on what MSPs can do to help their cyber security maturity and help their cyber hygiene. And this really is where we get into the relationship between cyber maturity and cyber insurance. So ConnectWise has what's called the MSP plus cybersecurity framework. This chart's a little bit of an eye chart here. So the takeaway is really that for most MSPs, when it comes to improving their cyber hygiene, all the processes, the controls, the people, the technology that they use, they're responsible for a lot. And even more so, the customers of MSPs believe that MSPs are responsible for everything, right? So there's a lot of emphasis that needs to be put on making sure that you have a defined process that you're following. And ConnectWise jumped in and said, hey, look, MSPs, like we said earlier, they're unique. They're unique in so many ways. Let's take a little bit of what we know MSPs are using, some different frameworks that we're using, and let's try to put it into a model that they could follow. So if you see here, if you go from left to right, you go from more baseline practices and controls to more advanced, and then ultimately mastery. And some of the things that ControlCase can speak to are how these controls fit in and how they relate to, again, whether cyber insurance, compliance frameworks like NIST or SOC 2. But for most MSPs, they look at this and they say, okay, we can do this. This is not as scary as we thought. But the point, the takeaway from this slide really is you have to start somewhere. You have to work on your cyber hygiene. And even more so than working on it, you have to baseline it, measure against it, with the ultimate goal being that you can get to a repeatable, scalable, adaptable place in your business where you're able to respond to emerging threats, and everybody knows what the incident response plan is and disaster recovery planning is. So there's a whole, a whole process that we can take you through. Again, we'll show that to you a little bit later. But Afi, I think you guys are uniquely qualified to speak to some of these controls.
Yeah, that is true, Jeff. So the security journey which you can begin, as a first step would be the MSP plus baseline fundamentals, right? The whole cybersecurity framework is a phased approach to mature your cybersecurity with going through these three different levels: fundamental, advanced, and mastery. Like each level enhances your cybersecurity hygiene and makes your environment more secured with proper risk management and control implementations. Now, there's a benefit of the program is to get your organization on an affordable path to mature your cybersecurity control framework. You start what we have put together as a baseline fundamental, as a self-assessment, and then you can move on to actually have a verified assessment for MSP plus advanced and MSP plus mastery. Now, when you look how these things are kind of correlated, right? You have better security controls. Obviously, you're reducing risk for yourself as well as you're reducing risk for your customers. It's it's a feather in the cap from a marketing perspective if you have to go out there and showcase it to your clients that you are security conscious and you have certain assessments done, whether it is again a self-assessment or against any other framework, advanced mastery, or different industry best practices framework. It basically helps you to reduce your risk. Reduced risk and showcasing a reduced risk increases your eligibility for your cyber insurance, maybe even drops your premium a bit. So the ROI is clearly stated that if you build good on your cybersecurity framework, you step ahead, you take these baby steps and have your framework and cybersecurity maturity conducted, it will help you in many ways, inclusive of cyber insurance. So let's
So
talk, why is it urgent? Reed, would you want to discuss a little more in details in terms of what you have seen in the cyber insurance marketplace?
absolutely. So this has certainly gotten more complex in the past year, perhaps year and a half, but it's not always been this way. So if we go back in time and we looked at where cyber insurance was and how it was being offered by carriers all the way back between 2015 and 2018, it was a very, very simple time. And the biggest reason is that carriers, their underwriting really was not underwriting. They were just asking basic information because this is a coverage they did not know much about. Some may say they're still learning, which I would agree with. And that created, it was a soft market, and you just basically had a ticking time bomb that was waiting to go off because you had a lot of policies that were being written. The policies were not being charged very much, and underwriters were not asking for really basic information to understand the risk. They were really just trying to capture the revenue of the end client, and they wanted to know what industry they were in. And they were saying, great, we know enough, and they were moving on. So I think we know the story from here. Well, that did not work out well. We had claims that started to rise. We had still overall consumers, their awareness was still low, so defenses were still low. I'm sure MSPs that'll resonate for those that were trying to get your clients more onto your security stack. And then we saw ransomware really start to press into a hot button. It became very real across many, many different industries. So as that was happening, we started to see a little bit of reaction on the insurance side. The demand was going up more and more. So insurers are looking at this going, okay, we need to change our process. We need to be looking at this more closely. If we go to the next slide, there's a lot of data that's coming in where I don't think you really have to go far to hear about some event to see a statistic that's relevant to you, where we're getting to this place now where the end clients are, and certainly MSPs, they're seeing that they don't need to touch the iron or touch the stove to know it's hot, right? Where years ago it seemed that unless you knew somebody that knew somebody, or maybe something happened to your business directly, this wasn't a concern. It's becoming more and more of a concern. So what's happening is, there's an increasing demand for cyber insurance, and the insurers themselves are now really getting into a hole. If we look at the next slide, what's starting to happen is that the loss ratios just started going up higher and higher. So, back in 2019, the scale started to tip. And you could say some carriers were already seeing this, and you already started to see some back out completely. But what ended up happening is you saw many of these main carriers that were losing a lot of money. And when you see these loss ratios, just something to understand here is that most carriers, when they get close to the 60-65% range, that's where they're no longer breaking even. They're now taking a loss. So when you see a carrier that's going up to 98% or even above 100%, they're not only taking a loss, they're losing significant money. And surprise, surprise, insurance is a for-profit business. So insurers really took a hard pivot. Now, that hard pivot, a lot look at it and they go, okay, this is rational. This is what should have been happening all along. But for insurance, it's a really slow moving industry. So this was a pretty dramatic shift on our side of the fence, where we saw applications all of a sudden go from just being 1 page to 7 pages, right? We saw the insurers only needing to ask for the revenue and industry, and now they need to fully understand where are we on the security controls, where are we on policies, procedures. So there really was this huge shift, and guess what? Who's right at the center of all of it? The MSP. So for the SMB market, we have insurance agents and we work with agents every day. So this isn't, I'm not trying to highlight, faults unnecessarily here, but it's just a reality. Insurance agents know a lot about insurance, right? In our community, agents know a ton about workman's comp, they know a ton about general liability, but cyber is this new thing. And not only that it's new, is it tough to understand, but it's a level of complexity that's outside of many agents' depth. So what ended up happening is there was this shift for the risk advisors. So you saw businesses that were trying to look for a good resource, and they're going to the technical one. They're going to the IT/MSP for this conversation. So whether or not the MSP community wanted to get involved on the cyber insurance conversation, this just happened. It was thrown into their lap. So when we look at this in this partnership, when we look at what ConnectWise offers, we look at what ControlCase is doing and they offer, and we look at what Fifth Wall is bringing to the table, what we see is an opportunity to leverage this and to look at this and say, okay, this is the inevitable shift, but now we can look at this, we can get organized around it, and we can really lean into it. And so we want to kind of move on to seeing what we can do today to reduce risk and what that looks like. So Afi, Jeff, do you guys want to go ahead and take it from here on the compliance journey?
Yeah, thanks, Reed. So when we announced the partnership back in at IT Nation Secure in June of 2022, this is what we presented to our audience and attendees. And we've talked about a little bit of scary stuff, and it seems a bit daunting. And again, that's why we got involved, and that's why we partnered with with ControlCase and Fifth Wall. And it's not really a linear journey. So there's a lot of things going on inside your business at once. We realize that, but if you're looking for a jumping off point and you feel like you're a little bit behind, the first thing that you can do is take a self-assessment, look within, right? Protect your own house, as we like to call it. And ControlCase has tools that will help you measure whether or not you're meeting certain controls. And for the ones that you're not meeting, we have playbooks to help you go and tackle those. Now, ultimately, in that time, you've probably got customers, asking you for help around, whether it's why am I getting non-renewed, or what are these products that this insurance company is telling me I need. Again, we want to make sure that you have a single place to go to manage all of that. And inside of the ConnectWise platform, and using some of the frameworks that Fifth Wall has helped us build around cyber insurance and what the common requirements are, we can tackle that with you. And I think the idea is that whether or not it's cyber insurance or it's another compliance framework, all of these different compliance frameworks and or frameworks in general are just made up of a subset of controls. And we're really looking to streamline how you manage those controls and measure those controls. And so, Afi, again, you guys are the experts here, and I think it's appropriate for you to talk about a little bit more about how you can measure some of these frameworks and what you guys do.
Certainly, Jeff. So when you look at this particular, what we have put together as a whole team, right? We have put a path for MSPs to get on with an affordable assessment against a framework which is devised by ConnectWise for the MSP community, because they know the MSP community for the past decade, right? We'll use that particular framework that will help you lower your risk, as Jeff mentioned earlier, protect your house and even your client's data, and then how all of that kind of combines together to get yourself to a cyber insurance eligibility. So that's basically how your maturity journey would go from a cyber security perspective, going through these different MSP plus cybersecurity levels. Now, let me walk you across that whole particular journey. We have put the technology assessment tools together. It's called ControlCase Compliance Hub, which will be available within a ConnectWise Managed PSA, right? So if you already have ConnectWise Managed PSA, Compliance Hub comes as a free assessment tool within it. You can use the MSP Plus playbooks, which is available from ConnectWise University. So you have links for that. You can understand what that framework is about. You can review your fundamental controls within ConnectWise Manage under the Compliance Hub tab. Go through a self-registration and a self-assessment process by providing evidence to show how you are compliant against the MSP plus fundamental, the basic one. Okay. Once all of these pieces are done, it's internally mapped to all industry standards like PCI, like SOC, HIPAA, NIST 853, NIST 800 171, FedRAMP, CMMC, MSP Plus Advanced, as well as an MSP Plus Mastery. Go through the process, figure out where you reside within the process, and then you can go ahead and do any of these, right? You can mature your cybersecurity framework or your cybersecurity to MSP Advanced or MSP Mastery, or diverge or tangent into the different other industry frameworks, because in underlying all these controls from different domains are kind of mapped together. right? You could essentially, if you are MSP plus fundamentals completed, you could be like 50% towards your SOC 2 type 2 attestation report. You could be 32% towards your HIPAA. So you can take a quick look through the Control Case Compliance Hub tab within ConnectWise Manage where you reside. Now that's one part of the story. Let's take it to the next level, which is cyber insurance. Now, cyber insurance, as Reed mentioned earlier, this questionnaires have gone from one pager to seven pages, right? What are they asking? All they're asking is, do you have these security technical controls in place so they get an assurance that the threats and breaches might not happen with you? Those technical controls, if you have put in place, you have to provide that kind of information back to your cyber insurance organizations or insurance companies so that they can provide you a lower premium or give you eligibility for cyber insurance. Everything is mapped together. You start at MSP plus fundamentals, but you could do a variety of other frameworks. You could provide the same kind of details for your cyber insurance for yourself as well as your clients, saying you abide by these controls, and then that's how you can get through the journey, and that's how the correlation is between the cybersecurity maturity and cyber insurance. Jeff, would you like to add anything on that?
Yeah, so what has been, again, if you think about a day in the life of the MSP, there's so much going on that you know their customers might require, might say, we're hearing more and more, AFI's MSP, you need to be aligned to CMMC, or we have to find another managed service provider, or you might have customers as an MSP, you might have customers that come to you and say, hey, I need to be HIPAA compliant, right? And without a way to manage that and to centrally collect all of the information that's required in order to not only be compliant, but to attest to compliance and then pass an audit, it could sprawl, and it could sprawl quickly and create a bit of a spiderweb effect. So I think this graph is a great representation of how once you are on a path, ControlCase makes it very easy for you to hit your mark and return to your normal course of business and not be disrupted by the chaos of having to comply to a framework, or you didn't pass an audit, so now you have to go back to your customer and talk to them about why they didn't pass. So there's a whole bunch of value here just in this one slide and with what you mentioned earlier.
All right, great. Thank you, Jeff. Reed, any more closing statements on the whole cyber security and cyber insurance?
I don't think so. I think the only thing is, what we're going to consistently be asked for is just more clarity and transparency on what cyber insurance is looking for. Specifically, what is the carrier saying? How are they defining what good looks like? So in turn, insurance is just becoming another compliance, right? And so it's really, really exciting for me because this is a really clear way to showcase that. And there's a level of consistency that can be brought because right now in our world, it's not consistent. And so, we can, the fifth wall side, we can keep boiling this down, and we can keep, doing what we do on our side to get a lot of the good information. But this is, to me, the easiest way that we've seen to be able to get this distilled, where folks can see it clearly and it being clearly defined, and it can be consistently up to date. So that's all on my side, Afi.
All right, great. Thank you, Reed. Just a quick little piece around ControlCase. ControlCase as an organization has been in the business of essentially assessing, certifying, attesting companies with different regulations, PCI, industries, payment card industry standard with all the different PCI standards and variants. HIPAA, high trust, SOC 2 type 2 attestation, SOC 1 type 2 attestation, ISO certifications, FedRAMP, CMMC, and many others. We have this service, which is one audit where you assess once and comply to many different regulations. As everybody knows, underlying certain controls kind of have a common theme. So we could assess once, collect evidence once, and then kind of map it back to different regulations and regimens of compliance of industry standards and provide you that certifications. Along with the certifications, we also have continuous compliance services, which goes towards doing security, vulnerability scans, and penetration tests, and so on and so forth. I would like to thank everybody listening to this particular webinar again, and you can reach us through the ConnectWise marketplace. The link is provided here on the slide, or you can email us at contact@controlcase.com or visit our website at www.controlcase.com for any further information you would need on cybersecurity maturity and cyber insurance. Thank you all for listening to this webinar and have a wonderful day. Thank you.